This hearing is called to examine an Arctic-focused agenda, and I am pleased to be joined by Chairman Duncan and members of the Western Hemisphere Subcommittee. All right, thank you. Here we go. Just under 1 year ago, the Europe, Eurasia, and Emerging Threats Subcommittee held its first hearing on the Arctic. Since then, the United States has assumed the chairmanship of the Arctic Council, and the level of congressional interest in our government's Arctic agenda has grown. While the Alaskan congressional delegation, Don Young in particular, or he perhaps is the whole delegation, has been in the forefront of efforts to champion the U.S. Arctic positions. Elected representatives from the lower 48 have increasingly come to appreciate the potential of the Arctic to benefit the entire country. As I noted last time, while we all recognize the receding ice, the purpose of this hearing is not to debate science, whether or not what is taking place is part of a natural cycle or whether it can be traced to the human production of CO2. The fact remains the Arctic is in stark contrast to the Antarctic and is now more accessible than it has been for decades. The purpose of today's hearing is to ask and discuss what are we doing with the Arctic and what do we want to do with the Arctic. Scientific programs and research into topics such as ocean acidification and science of the ice flows help us to understand the Arctic environment, but to what end? Is our government working with private industry and our allies, such as Canada, to build the infrastructure which enables strategic economic development, mineral, oil, natural gas extraction, as well as the possibility of commercial fishing? Or, as I fear, is this administration so focused on global warming that we are passing up ways of expanding prosperity and the well-being of these emerging opportunities in the Arctic? Let me note that while sometimes the rhetoric associated with the so-called race for the Arctic can be a bit exaggerated, the Arctic is not immune from the same forces of geopolitics which apply to other areas of the globe. One disturbing element, at least to me, of the Arctic discussion is the Cold War analogy that everything Russia is doing in the Arctic is a national security threat. We should not be finding ways, we should be focusing on finding ways to cooperate in mutually beneficial development with Russia rather than approach the Arctic issues with hostility and belligerence. Admiral Papp, during your testimony in December, you laid out a vision for the U.S. chairmanship of the Arctic Council. I look forward to hearing about the progress we've made and how those concepts have been put into action. Admiral, and I will pronounce it, Galouet. Okay. And Michael, the subcommittee, we all in the subcommittee look forward to learning about how the Coast Guard and Navy are preparing to carry out their missions in the Arctic and where those lines of authority rest at this moment. It would be especially useful to hear about how our country is working with our allies and Arctic partners to leverage and to build on the experiences that we have so far in order to have some real progress that we can demonstrate in the years ahead. Additionally, is the current division of labor between the Coast Guard and the Navy the best way to carry out our Arctic strategy? Or might some realignment allow our government to be more effective?